Thank you for bringing your voice to the 24 Global Leader Conversation on Food Systems. The global conversation represents so much of what we hope the coming year will be about. Many people from different walks of life are coming together to engage in solutions-oriented dialogues and to address the roots of what we want to achieve over the next 10 years. Our vision is to make this a people's summit, giving voice to citizens in every country of the world. With its activities spread over more than a year, the summit will bring together key players from the world of science, business, policy, healthcare, academia, as well as farmers, indigenous people, youth organizations, consumer groups, environmental activists, everyone, including you. I believe we can all find common ground in which we can grow a sustainable future together. We already know what we want the future to look like. We have the Sustainable Development Goals to guide us and to support how we will measure our progress in achieving the future. Food is the instrument that touches all our lives, and through its lens, we can realize this vision of a better world. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food system is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Join us today. Join the Food System Summit. Join the conversation. Join the global dialogue we are launching today and over the course of the coming year. And together, I'm very confident we can build a just and resilient world where no one is left behind.
Hi, it's Paul Newnham here. Thank you, Agnes, for that inspiring message to kick off today's Voices of the Food System Summit. Today is World Food Day, and my name is Paul Newnham from the Sustainable Development Goal 2 Advocacy Hub. It's really great to be with you. And if you're on social media, please share your thoughts with hashtag Voices of the Food Systems. We are going to hear from an amazing group of speakers, and we're going to be starting off in Fiji with Chef Robert Oliver. Chef Robert Oliver is a New Zealand chef, award-winning author and television presenter of the Pacific Island Food Revolution, the name of this first session. So over to you, Chef Robert.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, everybody. Welcome to the first place on Earth to greet the day, the place where time begins, Bulavinaka, Talopalava, and Malolele from the big, blue, beautiful Pacific. Today we have panelists from Fiji, from Papua New Guinea, from Vanuatu, from Samoa, and from the Kingdom of Tonga. We are collectively honored to be opening a 24-hour global relay 2020 of the United Nations World Food Summit. Let's begin though by picturing a plate of food and imagine that plate of food being at the center of a wheel. And from there, there are spokes emanating out to form a matrix of connections and relationships to farming, to cultural identity, to local economies, to tourism identity, to food security, to climate change, to biodiversity, and more. The whole wheel, the entire matrix, is what we refer to as food systems. And what we choose to put on that plate affects everything else. Now, I'm just checking on our guest list before I proceed to the next part of this. 1 second. I'm going to switch our program just a little bit. And I would like, Francesco, if you'd please introduce, play the first video, which is the Pacific Island Food Revolution Project.
Food is central to Pacific life. Most of our activities in the rural communities and farming communities evolves around food.
Diabetes, cancer, hypertension, heart attack. One of the 4 main contributing factors to all NCDs is unhealthy nutrition.
far too many children in the Pacific are either overweight or underweight. They're either eating the wrong foods or they're not eating the good nutrition that's right in their backyard.
Imagine right now we are amputating limbs, one in every 8 hours. So therefore, we are producing 700 disabilities a year. People don't embrace local foods because of a few factors, strong marketing by processed foods manufacturers and producers.
Most Papua New Guineans really love their greens. I think the problem is that the actual access to it and perhaps even the expense of it, especially in the larger towns like Port Moresby.
My continuous hope is that people embrace fresh food and local cuisines. It has helped sustain our forefathers. They lived longer lives because of that.
When someone valuable is taken out of a societal structure because they're sick, this is when societies start to falter.
If children don't get adequate and appropriate nutrition in the earliest years of their lives, they will not be able to develop their fullest potential, and they won't be able to contribute to their own country, their own societies, their own communities. Literally, the stake over the Pacific is at stake if we don't change these issues.
What happened?
Video finished, Robert.
It's still playing, right?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Well, it hasn't finished yet.
I will take it again.
In a local context, it's very inspiring.
My kids, when you tell them that's what's cooked in the Pacific Food Revolution cooking show, then they'll start eating it.
It's exciting, interesting. Every time when the program comes on, everybody's happy. They want to, oh, Daddy, put the TV on. We want to watch this.
I've seen the Pacific Island Food Revolution inspiring families to change the way they cook. It's no longer about, doctor, what do we need to eat? It's more them going, doctor, I saw this on the Pacific Island Food Revolution. I thought I might try this. What do you think?
We're getting young men to be in the kitchen cooking. Traditionally in our culture, we feel like it's the girl's job, but we try to bring that out in the program to say that it's a partnership in this.
We've really only just begun. I mean, we've had one season play in the Pacific Island countries, and having one show play once, it'll just create some sort of awareness. We need to go for a while yet.
The revolution begins with you. And that's what social change is. And the most obvious thing to change first is what goes in your mouth.
To kick things off on a very high note, it is my absolute honor Hi again. To kick things off on a very high note, it is my honor, my absolute honor, to introduce our first guest, His Excellency Major General Retired Georgie Konote, the President of the Republic of Fiji. Mbulavinaka, sir.
Robert.
How are you? Great to see you. Welcome. And listen, last time I saw you, we were supposed to have a cup of tea the following week, but that didn't quite work out.
Yeah, good to see you again, Robert.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your opening greeting for the conference, Sir Excellency.
Your Excellency, the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Deputy Secretary, Madam Secretary Amina Mohammed, Special Envoy to the World Food Summit, the Honorable Agnes Kalibata, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. And greetings from Fiji as we celebrate World Food Day. It is an honor to be selected as the eminent champion of the Food System Summit that will be convened by the UN Secretary General in October next year. Now, the campaign for healthy eating in Fiji is close to my heart and for good reasons. Cardiovascular disease and other non-communicable diseases in Fiji and across our region are the most serious health challenge of our generation. So I am grateful for the chance to continue that advocacy as part of this 24-hour global relay conversation with key stakeholders of the UN Food System Summit.
Now, Excellency, as well as being the president of the most amazing country on the planet, which we all have to admit is true, you're also Fiji's national champion to address the prevalence of NCDs, non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and heart disease, which of course are largely due to what people eat. In Fiji alone, it is estimated that 84% of all deaths are NCD related. That's a very big figure. Your Excellency, how did this happen?
It is a very big figure indeed, Robert. Now, behind that figure are countless Fijian families who have had to say goodbye to their loved ones too soon. Now, this is not only a Fijian problem, but in my humble opinion, I believe a regional problem as well. Now, 7 of the top 10 countries with the highest rates of diabetes in the world are here in the Pacific. Now, over 25% of the adult population in most Pacific Island countries is clinically obese, compared to a global average of about 13%. Now, NCDs currently account for around 70 to 75% of all deaths in the Pacific Islands, with 84% of these deaths occurring in Fiji, sadly. And that figure still does not capture the heavy burden that NCD-related disabilities impose on our citizens and economic potential. Now, Robert, you ask why? Or what is this happening to us now? Now, it is because our food system is broken, and those cracks are due to a fundamental shift in the way our people eat. Now, a shift towards processed pre-made food and away from traditional, healthier staples of the Fijian diet, the original foods, which have been part of our cuisine for ages. Now, Fiji is not a food desert. We have the land and the know-how to grow sufficient amounts of high-quality local produce. And I have a garden myself. Right now, out back, I'm growing yams, kumala, dalo, cassava, corn, popos, even some dwarf coconuts from my home island of Rotuma. And nothing makes me happier than sitting down for a meal where I can share that produce with my grandchildren. Many Fijian parents and grandparents know that same feeling. We're a nation of backyard gardeners. We are a people who can look to our land and our reefs to sustain ourselves. And we did just that for generations. But in recent times, our people are opting more for processed foods. Now, these can be more convenient, they'll be cheap, but they lack nutrition. That leads to far higher long-term costs like obesity, which leads to our very high numbers of NCDs. And that bad health can lead to bad outcomes in other areas like education and employment. Now, sadly, health foods sometimes do not seem worth the effort. But if every Fijian understands just how those seemingly convenient processed foods impact their health, I know we would start to see different choices be made. And we would save lives from the scourge of NCDs. Now, that is why I have made this campaign so personal. The COVID-19 crisis has showed us how important local food supply chains can be. With supply chains under strain, we have seen vulnerabilities in the global food system too. We can address those vulnerabilities by strengthening sustainable food systems at home. In Fiji's case, that is absolutely critical to combating the scourge of NCDs.
Excellency, we're so grateful to have had your company today. I'm really grateful to hear that you care so much about your people. It's obvious, just in your smile. We can see it in your smile. And I'm also really grateful that you've elevated the very important issue of NCDs to your level. So Vinaka Vakalevu, sir, thank you so much for your presidential grandeur to open the conference today. And be seeing you very soon, I hope, for that cup of tea and talanoa at the State House in your garden.
Robert, thank you. The solution starts with changing mindsets. Every Fijian should have a working knowledge of how their diet impacts their health. They should understand the importance of physical activity and avoiding smoking and other harmful substances. Now, living a healthy and active lifestyle can no longer be the prerogative of young athletic men or women, no matter their age, their gender, or background. Every Fijian must strive for healthy balance of nutrition and activity. Fiji and other Pacific Island countries share a great deal in common. We can learn from each other's experiences, and that process of cooperative knowledge sharing must be strengthened through a whole of region approach to this crisis. I see promise in moving forward with the Pacific Island Forum, leaders' recognition of the NCD crisis in our region. Your project, Robert, the Pacific Island Food Revolution, gives us another solution. And that revolution solution is quite literally in our backyards. Pacific Islanders should start buying local vegetables and fruits from our local farmers or growing it themselves where they can. We must get back to our roots of healthy, local grown and prepared food, but we must also reimagine the staples of our diet, creating good tasting, affordable, nutritious options that lead to better diets and flatten the curve of NCDs in the Pacific. Of course, there is no issue in the Pacific that can be solved without full consideration given to the impacts of climate change. In Fiji, disaster risk reduction and mitigation measures are a key part of our efforts to build food systems which are not only robust but resilient. Some of the resilience will come from increasing the scale of regional food production, and I look forward to a future where healthy, locally produced food from Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and Vanuatu are available in the markets and on supermarket shelves across the region. Here in Fiji, local food businesses are responding to new demands for healthier eating options. Now, many Fijians are returning to their land to ride out the COVID-19 crisis, growing their own food. And we are achieving a wider recognition of the importance of healthy eating throughout government, the private sector, civil society, and in Fijian communities. But there is a tremendous amount of work left to be done. And I look forward to sharing our progress next October at the World Food Systems Summit. For now, I wish you all a happy World Food Day. I hope one day you can come to Fiji. Where you do, you will each have a seat waiting for you at my dining table with a plate full of delicious Fijian produce for you to enjoy. Nawalevu, Robert.
Nawalevu.
Thank you.
I can assure you, Excellency, that we will all show up for that generous offer. Thank you so much for your words today, Excellency, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Naka.
God bless you. Nisamode. God bless. Nimode.
Yeah, nisamode. Our next panel is made up. Our next panel is made up of some of the incredible leaders in the Pacific Islands, spanning from political to traditional to cultural leadership. Firstly, please welcome the Honourable Ralph Regan-Vanu, Minister of Parliament for Port Vila, Vanuatu. Ralph is a committee member of the Indigenous Partnership for Agro-Biodiversity and Food Sovereignty and is a founding member of Slow Food Vanuatu. Our next panelist, please welcome Honourable Amelia Afuha-Mango Tuipulotu, an adjunct associate professor to the University of Sydney and the Minister of Health in the Kingdom of Tonga, not to mention a star of Pacific Island Food Revolution. Next guest, the Honourable Fiame Naomi Mataafa. Fiame is part of a Samoan political dynasty and a paramount chief. Her father was Samoa's first Prime Minister and she was Samoa's first female cabinet minister and was until most recently Samoa's Deputy Prime Minister. Fiame is also a noted climate change advocate in the Pacific. We've had 3 honorables, and now we go to the fabulous Andi Maimalanga Tapunai. Andi is a dear friend and is also the Executive Director of Women in Business Development in Samoa, an organization that has fostered the organic certification of over 800 family farms in Little Samoa, opening the door to international trade with, amongst others, the Body Shop. Do I have all my panelists here? I do. Can I get a little wave from you all?
Hello, Robert.
Hi, I want to see you all. That's great. Ralph, are you here too? And Amelia.
I'm here.
Great. Ralph, I'm going to start with you, if I may. Great to see you all. Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Ralph. It could be said that one of the biggest single disruptions to the indigenous food and cultural systems that serve Vanuatu and the wider Pacific well for thousands of years would be colonization. How do you view the role of culture and indigenous knowledge in guiding Vanuatu to its position in the modern world? Over to you, Ralph.
Well, thank you, Robert, and it's a great honor to be on this panel on this auspicious day. So it's true that colonization was a great disruptor to our history, long tradition of self-sustaining, productive indigenous food systems. But the fact to remember is that in the Pacific, we still have the highest amount of land under traditional customary tenure. We still have the highest number of indigenous peoples as proportions of national populations. And so we still do have a very strong and vibrant traditional economy, as I call it, which is basically tradition-derived ways of living and ways of producing food. And we heard the president of Fiji refer to that. And so we have a very strong existing base upon which to build. We're very lucky in that way in the Pacific, and that our traditions and our traditional food systems still play such a very strong central role in the lives of most of the population, particularly the rural population. The difficulty for us is to get the urban populations, who are the ones who have moved most towards the processed food lifestyle, to also participate more fully in this traditional food production systems. And so in Vanuatu, for example, we've just come up with our National Sustainable Development Plan, which is aligned with the UN Global Sustainability Goals. And that was launched in 2016. And interestingly, the whole National Sustainable Development Plan is posited on a foundation of culture and cultural values. And that's because we recognized that, for example, in food systems, if you want to talk about health outcomes, the best outcomes are from our traditional food systems. If you want to talk about economical outcomes, like financial, in terms of imports versus exports, having to spend a lot of money importing food, the most economical system is our indigenous traditional food systems. If you want to talk about environmental sustainability, we've proved that over thousands of years in the Pacific of using these systems to grow our food. And also in terms of cultural continuity and maintaining the social fabric of our communities as we come into globalization, making sure we try and keep our families together. And so in all these ways, this is the way to go. So the question is, how do we reinforce these systems, focus particularly on processing of food, processing of traditional foods so they come on supermarket shelves so urban families can access them in an affordable and convenient way? And also, how do we put in place policies, for example, trade policies, industrialization policies that support the traditional food systems, indigenous knowledge that has been part of and is part and parcel of those food systems, and our culture to continue to play a predominant role in producing the food we eat. Thank you, Robert.
Ralph, every time I thought of a comment, you answered what I was thinking right away. So I actually got no follow-up with that. That's just a terrifically comprehensive answer. Thank you so much for the Vanuatu perspective. Amelia, I'd like to go to you next, if I may. There's been a real fallout, and if you could just unmute your microphone too, Amelia. There's been a real fallout in the health numbers of Pacific people as local food systems have been displaced by processed foods, and that's already been the theme today. However, you are the Minister of Health in a major Pacific nation, and we have a crisis of NCDs in the Pacific due to poor diet, and no one gets this better than you, Amelia. How do you envisage the future Pacific diet to look, and how do we get there?
Your Excellencies, thank you so much, Robert. On behalf of the Kingdom of Tonga, I am very honored to be part of this World Food Day. I am ambitious, and I envision the Pacific and Tonga will take a very strong stand and take pride in their local cuisine. So the future for me looks very bright, where we will engage and take pride in our local, fresh, traditional, and easily accessible and economically viable for our vulnerable population and, of course, the population at large.
The theme comes up over and over again. The solution to the Pacific health crisis is in Pacific culture, in the Pacific backyard. Thank you so much, Malo Aupito, from our Honourable Minister of Health in the Kingdom of Tonga. And I always claim you as my own, Amelia, because you were so amazing in Pacific Island Food Revolution. Thank you so much.
And of course, Robert, we have got no choice. The Pacific have got no choice. We've got to act now. Act is the must, and we must do that now. And we must be willing to work together as partnership, strong partnership, partnership, together with all key partners, because this is about our future, the future of our children. Health is wealth, and we know everything is about money, how we can fund sustainable Tonga and sustainable Pacific. So we must make bold and courageous actions now.
Thank you so much, Amelia. FMA, climate change is the other big issue in the Pacific, and there was real and actionable intersection with climate change and food choices with what we eat. Something you said on Pacific Island Food Revolution that I just loved was climate change is not something we talk about, it's something we do. FMA, how do we tackle climate change on the plate as an individual?
Talofa, Robert, and Your Excellencies, very pleased to join you on this global conversation marking World Food Day. And I'm particularly taken by the themes of grow, nourish, and sustain together. And I think, it ties in the conversation that has already started. Yes, Robert, there are clear linkages between climate change to food, to sustainable agricultural production, to livelihoods, and of course, to health. And these have been spoken to by our various speakers. I just wanted to note that, the global impact of COVID, we've noticed that people are now more engaged intensely in agricultural activities, whether it be at a subsistence level or through to more commercial production. And I think this has been a response to ensuring that there is food security in a period of uncertainty. But it has also brought a positive outcome for the climate change agenda. The growing of food trees and plants and assisting in that climate change action. It's been quite notable, and I take Ralph's comments where he spoke to the land holding that we have here in the Pacific. So people have access to land to develop agriculturally. Of course, there are other challenges about utilizing that land, but it is there. But what has been notable is that the urban communities that live in smaller plots are even utilizing those plots to grow their food. So people are taking action. I think that's what you were alluding to. We can talk about climate change, but we all need to take the action. And whether people have been motivated by different circumstances, and in this case, the COVID impact and the insecurities that people have, especially around food security. So the other element that I wanted to speak to is that we all act universally, globally through the UNFCCC with governments. But ultimately, Robert, I think it is being said that for us to really address and combat climate change, we all have to act individually. So the linkages between the production of food and climate change is happening. It's happening at all levels, starting from the global right down to the activities of individuals and our communities. Now, I know, Robert, that you are time constrained.
Yes.
So I was just thinking
you can
how
see
I
that
would
look on my face.
conclude my comments. And I was reflecting on the moral, of the story of Chicken Little, that story about holding up the sky. So I think the moral of Chicken Little is that we must all have courage. And more than courage, we all have to play our part and hold up our part of the sky. So I think we're doing it in the Pacific in our different ways and at all levels, from the individual to communities, to our governments, the region, and also on the global stage. So thank you
so
for
much,
allowing me to join this conversation.
Always a pleasure to see you, Fiame, and I look forward to our next Rum and Something in Samoa. Turning to Andy now. Andy, you are a rock star in the world of organics, and you're a dear friend as well, and your organization has curated organic farming as the right way of doing farming in the Pacific. Can you tell me why organics are so right for the Pacific?
Sorry, so many obvious reasons, Robert, why organics is so right for the Pacific. It's the way people have farmed in the Pacific for generations. Organics is just traditional farming, actually, but it's now being monitored, audited, and given further value through proving that the food really is truly organic. But sadly, even though we have this rich plethora of good, healthy food growing all around us, we in the Pacific have taken to imported foods to such an extent that many NCDs have become a serious problem for our people. With COVID-19 pandemic now affecting people and economies around the world, I've noticed in Samoa that our people, just like Fiame said, have become more interested in going back to farming. And in returning to farming, they're eating local food. And I believe, Robert, that your Pacific Island Food Revolution program began to prepare us for this time, because even the people that have lost jobs have gone back to farming. And where at Women in Business, we've taken to having a virtual market every month. We've just had our 4th one. And this is offering people an opportunity, especially those that have been affected economically by COVID, to be able to use the internet, use an app to actually sell their produce. And what they're selling is lots of local food. And, not only are we in Samoa taking care of our health at this difficult time, but we're ensuring that people's economic livelihoods are intact as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy, and God bless you, Andy, for all the work you do for Samoa and the wider Pacific, and for young women all over the world. I know how great your reach is, and I adore you, and thank you for everything you do. I think listening to you all, the word sustainability seems to be weak. Pacific people have always lived sustainably, and the key to me the theme that's coming up is the knowledge from the past is actually the blueprint for the future, albeit formatted for the modern situation. And food, that is certainly true. Thank you so much, esteemed leaders, panelists. I feel that with leaders like this in the Pacific, the whole Pacific is in very good hands. Thank you so much. Our next panel, goodbye, thank you. Our next panel is with the Pacific Island Food Revolution family. Well, the angels of the revolution. Have a look at this trailer first. Francesco, if you'd play the trailer, please.
Thank you for bringing your voice to the 24.
Last year saw the beginning of a revolution in the Pacific. A revolution that set new standards and changed lives forever.
It's not going to stop here. This will take us to the world.
And this year, it's going to get even bigger.
It would be an honor to win this.
We're practicing what we preach about eating healthier.
As 12 new teams compete to represent their home nations.
I have the passion for cooking. This is heaven here in Tonga.
They're ready to give it their all.
It's hot, 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 hot. Stop moving the stuff.
Sorry. Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man.
And wow our renowned judges.
I think they have done a fantastic job.
I'd like to see nurturing and fulfilling Tongan food.
To help our people make affordable, healthy meals for their families.
Your participation is going to inspire.
This year, our cooks are more determined than ever to take the revolution to the world.
You ready?
Yes.
Season 2 of the Pacific Island Food Revolution starts now.
Please welcome our next panelist, Batasi Mackenzie-Rowe, the Queen of Vanuatu Cuisine and the Vanuatu co-host of Pacific Island Food Revolution. Jennifer Baingweko, our angel from Papua New Guinea and a featured guest of Pacific Island Food Revolution. Dora Rossi, Samoa's Nigella and the Samoan co-host of Pacific Island Food Revolution. And lastly, the cheeky one, please welcome Fololeni Kerr, Pacific Island Food Revolution from the Kingdom of Tonga. Welcome, angels. And Jennifer, I'd like to start with you if I can. You're from Papua New Guinea, which has 14,000 species of plants and is the most biodiverse island on Earth. What do we lose if biodiversity is reduced, and how can we stop this happening?
Hi, Robert, and hi, everyone. As you know, Papua New Guinea is the cradle of agriculture, and it's one of the oldest archaeological sites for this. Robert, in short, loss of biodiversity equates to loss of food supply, nutrition, and inevitably social unrest. It's imperative that the global food system focus on food sovereignty and the promotion of plant-based solutions to these issues. We need to prepare the human race for a new integrated global system which is sustainable. Local and indigenous, nutrient-dense, abundant food-producing plants need to be identified, propagated, and distributed to the world's largest food producers, and that's the peasant farmers. We need to plant more food trees as they produce food and of course store water. A global campaign must be launched to create food forests. In fact, I don't know if you know, but Papua New Guinea gave the world sugar, bananas, and breadfruit, among other foods. And of course, the amazing thing about breadfruit is that it produces up to 450 kgs of food. And the banana, of course, is the most important food after rice, maize, and wheat. So the indigenous people and Pacific people in the world, we have the solutions. And if the powers that be are willing to humble themselves and listen to us, to hear the people, we have deep knowledge systems that can be utilized at this time to save humanity. Collectively, we have all the information we need to solve these problems. Now we need the will, the resources, the coordination, and the very urgent implementation. We are on a precipice and we are hanging on that last thread. This is urgent, Robert, and we need to act now.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Very concise, very clear message. I'd like to now go to Samoa's Nigella, Dora Rossi. And Dora, you are a chef of two of Samoa's best known restaurants. What action can you, God, I love seeing you, Dora. What action can you take as a chef to create, so you as a chef, Dora, what action can you take to create a positive food system?
Thank you, Robert. Chefs are key ingredients in creating and promoting sustainable food systems because we create demand. We influence what farmers grow. As a chef, I am in the commercial front line of food. My choices influence my customers. We create trends. And I recognize that I have become plant-based because I believe in the philosophy around that. Here in Samoa, our chefs are promoting menus with food linked to our indigenous culture, farm-to-table menus focused on seasonal local produce. In the effort to create a positive and sustainable food system, as chefs, we must push to create a food culture that enforces eating as an ethical act. I suggest promoting plant-based menus, utilizing local seasonal ingredients, and really showcasing our food culture with pride. Educating palates to appreciate not only food per se, but the story of the people behind it. This creates connection and it creates awareness. Plant-based is no longer a fad, people, and it is definitely, in my opinion, a solution to many of the issues we are trying to address today. Whawhitai lava, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dora. Fantastic insights and really good to hear from a working chef. And now to my dear sister from Vanuatu, Batausi. You are both a nutritionist and the authority on local food of Vanuatu. Batausi, can you tell me what is the difference between nutritious food and local food?
Robert, there is no difference between nutrition and Vanuatu local cuisines. This is because of the fact that thousands of years, our ancestors have lived to be 100 years old, and they continue to maintain their eyesight and their teeth. When the colonization happened in Vanuatu and Christianity came, that's when we saw the change in our dietary pattern. And that's when a lot of the different imported foods came in, like white sugar, white rice, white flour, tins of meat and tins of fish. And that's when the dietary pattern started changing. But prior to that, our people were very resilient. The fact that they were well prepared for cyclones, for disasters, and they had all the plans in place that they could manage themselves to continue to sustain that healthy lifestyle. With regard to the changes that were happening since the 1800s, a lot of our people have changed their diet, and the result of that now is what we are seeing with the NCD crisis that is happening in Vanuatu, not only in Vanuatu, as we have heard from our other Pacific Island countries, we are all facing the same thing. So now is the time for us to embrace our traditional and custom values and to make sure that we maintain those in our eating habits, but also in regard to our production of our foods in our beautiful islands, so that we will continue to sustain our environment, but also our health, which is very important right now. With COVID-19 coming, it's much more important than ever. But you know what is now is the NCDs. So this is time for us to really focus on our countries and make that change. And it's already happening. And I'm very proud to hear that everyone in other Pacific Island countries are doing that since COVID-19. So let's continue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Patasi. I'd like to go to Flo now, the Kingdom of Tonga. And you often talk about emotion, Flo, when you're on the show in relation to food. And speak to us about this. And by the way, you're looking fabulous.
Oh, why, thank you. It's not hard. It's hard to actually get this perfection. But malo lele, everyone, and happy Friday from the Pacific. Yes, I always associate food with my memories of things that's happened to me, and it's because food is quite essential in our Pacific culture. It brings people when we have celebration, funerals, or even when we have dispute, we bring people together with food. It actually reminds me that family that eats together stay together. But sometimes I actually check out my neighborhood, whoever has the best food, and they will normally know when I'm coming around because I'll be whistling. That's my sign that I'm coming to your house. So when I got married and left, I'm pretty sure they missed me. So
that's right.
I'm sure when so things like this, when I have food later on, that reminds me of my parents who have passed or my grandfather. It instilled in me an idea of honoring the past. That's how food it is for us in the Pacific. It's honoring the past, fulfilling the present, and celebrating the future. And
lovely. Thank you, Flo. Thank you so much. I always love your perspectives. Now, to end our session today, where we've come up to the last minute here, I'd like us to return to the plate of food I mentioned at the beginning of our session. It's clear that the key to good health and robust island economies, climate change, biodiversity, sits in our own local food system, but it's not just about agenda. As Flo said, local food in the Pacific is about identity, memories, customary practices, and communities. You see, the story of the food is the story of the people. And despite our problems in the Pacific, this is a story of hope and justice. It's important to remember that we actually live in paradise. You see, the Pacific is the Garden of Eden with its pure blue oceans, organics everywhere, vibrant traditions, fantastic leaders, angels of the Pacific like we have. I feel that we can do this, and because we're small countries, we can create models for the rest of the world to copy. Now, we've all been living in the COVID era. Pacific Island Food Revolution views food as vital to the COVID response. So to sign off from the Pacific, we're going to play our COVID public service announcement that goes in the show this year. And with that, I say goodbye. If we could play the last video, please, Francesco. COVID-19 has brought us a whole new world. One thing is clear, what we eat is more important than ever.
Bulavinaka, Robert, you're right. Eating fresh local food helps your body to not only prepare and fight, but repair and heal. Hey, Dora.
Talofa, don't forget to wash your hands, often with soap and water. What do you say, Floalicious?
Yes. Wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. And remember, keep your distance. It's for your own safety.
That's right. Now's the time to cook together,
To garden together and shop at your local market as families.
What your children eat now will help their future health. Treat them to delicious meals with lots of fruit and vegetables.
Peter, they're only protective foods. What about foods for energy and bodybuilding?
That's right. Make sure you eat all the colors of the rainbow.
We don't have to look anywhere else. We have all the produce locally, and we have the traditional knowledge to guide us.
We're all in this together, and we can all get through this together. The revolution begins at home.
Thank you to Robert and His Excellency, ministers and high-level speakers really helping us join this discussion. It's great looking at local food solutions in the Pacific, from food heritage to traditional cuisines to Indigenous knowledge. Our next session is going to be coming up. I think we have a couple of videos just before we bring you in, Tiara, but it's great to see you guys are ready. We're going to be talking in our next session about oceans and bees, a story of resilience with key voices in conversation from all around New Zealand, right across to different parts of the Pacific. And so I think we have first a message from the UN Food Systems Summit with a call to action to become food system heroes, to help learn, share and gather for a food system transformation. So let's put the video on, and then we'll come back and bring you in, Tiara.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Well, welcome to the session Ocean and Bees, a story of resilience. I'm Paul Newnham from the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, hosting this first block of the voices of the food system on this World Food Day 2020. For this next block, we're going to be joined by a new set of faces that are going to come in. We've got chefs, we've got Indigenous people, youth climate activists, small farmers, heads of state, all kinds of different people are going to be coming in to talk about how we must transform our food system over the next 10 years. If you're joining us and you're on social media, please share your thoughts with the hashtag Voices of Food Systems. It's really important for this summit and for this conversation to hear from everyone and to bring all of these voices forward. And so there's lots of ways for you to get involved, and this is one of them. This session that we're about to start is facilitated by the Friends of the Ocean, and it's going to explore the intimate relationship between nature and humanity, specifically the vital role of oceans for producing our food, sequestering carbon, and more. So I'm going to invite Tiara Boys a commercial halibut fisherwoman from the west coast of Canada, to come in and moderate this session. Welcome. Over to you.
Hello, thank you so much, Paul. And thank you for inviting me to moderate this super important discussion today. I think we're in hour 3, and this segment is called Ocean and Bees, a Story of Resilience. I'll just give a brief introduction of who I am. I'm a second-generation commercial fisherman from an island off the Pacific coast of Canada. I've worked on my family's fishing vessel for over 18 years, and I recently completed my master's from the University of Curator in Iceland in marine and coastal resource management. So I work both locally with fishermen's associations here in Canada and internationally, having attended the Committee on World Food Security since 2016 as a youth delegate and as an active commercial fish harvester. I'm also an underwater photographer, and I love nothing more in this world than swimming through a kelp forest on a sunny day. I'm passionate about connecting food security, sustainable utilization of our marine resources, and I'm so honored to be here with so many inspirational people chatting about our oceans and our resources. So I'll just give a brief introduction of some of the people we have here. We've got Richard Duncan from Nui Honey and Chef Peter Gordon with us. They're going to be cooking up delicious seafood dish combining honey, fish, seaweed, and other tasty ingredients. And while my father's a fisherman, my mother's a beekeeper, so I'm going to be joining and cooking with some of the local ingredients that we have here in Canada. Richard Duncan is a development economist and business strategist, and he's been instrumental in developing the Pacific Bee Sanctuary. So he's passionate about honey and Pacific Island sustainable economic development and food security. Chef Peter Gordon is of Maori and Scottish descent, and he was the unofficial ambassador for New Zealand Food and Wine in London, where he was based for 31 years. But he's recently come back to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and he's got some exciting new businesses he's going to share with us later. Dr. Jennifer Smith is a professor and marine biologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. She's really interested in understanding how humans affect marine ecosystems while also working to develop solutions to combat anthropogenic threats. And rumor has it is she knows quite a bit about seaweed, and I'm really excited to touch on that. Dr. Jorge Torre is General Director and co-founder of Comunidad y Biodiversidad. It's an NGO that focuses on marine biodiversity conservation, sustainable fisheries through effective participatory approaches. And he'll also go in a little bit deeper into his bio. But before we can speak with any of these amazing humans, I think we have a video on nourishing billions and the need for quality, sustainable seafood. Excellent, thank you so much. So we're going to go into our next segment, and to start it out, we have a question. What do bees and fish have in common? To help us answer that riddle, I'm going to ask Chef Peter Gordon to come on, and as well Richard Duncan. So if you guys could join us.
Your phone as well.
Hi everybody.
Hello, Curator.
Awesome. So I'm really excited. What do you guys have in store for us today?
Well, we've got pelagic fish, we've got Niue honey, and we've got seaweed. So I think we're kind of ticking all the boxes really. And we're going to do a little, I'll do a little cooking thing, and Richard can talk all things honey from the beautiful island of Niue, of which I've only been the once, but you were there many times, weren't you, Richard?
Yeah, I used to live there. So I lived in Niue for a couple of years. This is going back 20 years ago, showing my age. And yeah, so I got to know the beekeeper there. And as you've said before, I was an economist working for the government. And I ended up all these years later going back to Niue and working with him to try and establish the business as a social enterprise on one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin was that Niue really has the last big isolated stock of clean honeybees left, and certainly in the region. And so we knew that in those intervening 20 years that we had to do something to protect bees, because there was obviously colony collapse disorder, particularly in the States and in Europe. So that was how I started again. I got re-engaged with with Niue, and I go back now probably half a dozen times a year, and I love it. It's a fantastic place.
Very cool, very cool. So we're going to start cooking. We're going to be connecting bees. We're going to be connecting fish and seaweed. Alchemy. I'm going to follow along in my kitchen as well with some of my local.
So I've just cut my yellowfin tuna and my broadbill, both pelagic fish, with sesame oil. And oh, look at that! That looks good. I like this technology. It's good, isn't it? I'm going to take this over, Richard, to the pan.
Sure.
So you can bring the camera with you if you want. You can bring that. Sure. Okay. So I want a really nice hot pan, and I'm oiling the fish rather than the pan. It just keeps it a bit cleaner. Maybe come back here. Good.
Well, I've got some wild Pacific halibut here. Is that an okay substitute for?
Oh, perfect. I love wild Pacific halibut. When I was living in London, which was until March this year, we would often get the most beautiful halibut in. I think it's one of my favourite non-kiwi fish, actually. And here I'm just leaning a little bit of ginger, but you could chop it or grate it. Up to you. A little bit of garlic here. A little bit of chili. I love chili. And when I was thinking of what to do, I was trying to think of how can I combine honey, fish, and seaweed. And I think, well, this will be the first time I've done it, so I'm sure hopefully it'll all turn out okay. I'm just going to turn my fish in the pan.
And Richard, what can you tell us about the honeybees and why they've kind of escaped some of these negative impacts, colony collapse and mites and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So the bees have been up there for a couple hundred years, like most of the Pacific, and it's just that's the link, I guess. If you said you're looking for a link between bees and the oceans, well, the oceans is what protected them, and so no one planned it that way. But as honeybee diseases spread around the globe, the Pacific Islands were isolated, and they're disease-free, mite-free, and that's really really special now, because as we know, bees are crucial. The pollination services that bees provide are crucial to food security, and so our vision was to protect those bees in Niue, and we worked very closely with the government of Niue and some agencies out of the EU to create this bee sanctuary, and we need to lift biosecurity a bit and make sure that they remain that way, disease-free and mite-free. And then we have a vision to use that bee stock to reboot beekeeping in the Pacific, and we think it's of vital importance because Pacific Islanders and islands have limited land resources, and so they need to maximize agricultural productivity. And in New Zealand, certainly in other places of the world, we wouldn't dream of leaving pollination services off our agricultural planning, and so that's very much a part of our of agriculture, horticulture in New Zealand. And so, but unfortunately, the bees in most of the islands, though they're clean and disease free, aren't that calm in a lot of places. And so, what happens when you have mixed subspecies of European honeybee, and you don't have an active apiculture industry and beekeepers, then they'll always revert and regress to an aggressive bee and become unworkable. And I mean, who wants to go out and be stung and chased by bees? And so it never really caught on. And so from a development perspective, many people have tried to get beekeeping going from livelihoods. Anyone can do it. It's not gender specific. It's not age related. The bees do all the work, let's face it. And so everyone's tried to get it going, but it hasn't really been able to stick because of this issue with bee stock. And so unfortunately what has happened in some places is they've tried to calm their bees down through breeding. And that's how we keep them in most of in the States and here in New Zealand. We would selectively breed traits into the bees to make sure they're workable. And so in some places in the islands, they've taken bees up from probably New Zealand to try and do that work. And unfortunately have brought mites, the varroa mite, into those places. So we're trying to say to the Pacific, hold fire, there's opportunities for honey and livelihoods, and the market for honey is very good. So there's opportunities for that. There's opportunities to get an agricultural industry going and augment your agricultural systems and productivity, but don't take bees from anywhere else. Wait for NUA to get projects bees certified, and then we've got bees for you. Calm
Great.
bees.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Talk about busy as a bee. Chef, can you run us through? I saw you put some fish in a water bath there, and you added.
I seared the fish, get it nice and just really coloured on the outside, then plunge it into this water bath. This just ice water, and normally, of course, you avoid fish and water, but once you've seared it with loads of ice, it chills it down and makes it really nice and rare in the middle. I took that out, then I added some ginger, chili, and garlic, and then I had some beautiful white asparagus from around Hamilton. It was picked just the other day by some friends. I tried in some karengo seaweed. It's an indigenous seaweed here. And I've thrown in some pine nuts that are being grown down in Marlborough. New Zealand's having this wonderful, New Zealanders, when I was growing up, we had to go everywhere to buy our ingredients, and now we're growing them here, which is really cool. So what I'm doing here is really a part of a salad that's going to go under the fish, and I'm going to add some miso and a bit of tomato as well. And then I've got these lovely kawa leaves. These were picked from a bush at a marae in South Auckland just recently, and I've said to you that you could use a bit of basil. So I'm just trying to make a lovely nutty, gingery, chili sort of salsa to accompany the tuna. The tuna and the broadbill.
Now, I've fallen behind, so I might have to catch up later. But I'm paying attention.
Okay. Yeah. And what the other thing that's key to this dish is, I thought what would be really lovely to do with the honey, and I think I'm just going to literally kind of deglaze the pan with it. So I'm going to put a bit of miso, which is made here in New Zealand, and some of this lovely Niue honey going in there. And for me, it was really amazing when I went to Niue. Well, I went to the beehives. I met Andy, who was out there, Mr. Bee, and put on a beehive suit and everything, and that was quite fun. But then I was able to bring honey back into New Zealand, and that's because the honey that's produced in Niue is a healthy honey, and you're allowed to, I think it's pretty much the only honey you're allowed to bring into New Zealand. So it shows the quality and the sort of food safety that's being taken seriously. Amazing.
Now, I have some honey here that my mother made. It's from the Comox Valley. I don't think it has the same illustrious qualities as Niue honey, but I'm so excited to combine it with fish. I've never done that before. What stimulated you to make that combination?
It was being told, can you try and use honey, fish, and seaweed? So I'm all up for a good challenge. But it works really well when you think of I suppose when you think of something that's a bit sweet and sour, honey and lemon is good, and lemon and fish are great. So I just know the honey is going to work really well with it.
Fantastic. And talk to me about your choices of fish. Why did you choose these species?
Well, I was keen when I was in Niue. There were many discussions about the pelagic fish and trying to have this sanctuary around Niue and protect the Pacific, because too often too many people are going out and just taking all the fish out of the ocean, and it's got to be managed better. So I thought I'd pay homage to those fish. We have some really beautiful New Zealand species. We have blue cod down south, and butterfish, and harpooker, and trevally and terrapin. But I wanted to, I guess, showcase fish that you would find in the Pacific rather than New Zealand fish.
Fantastic. Okay, what are the next steps?
Okay, just warm the tomato in the pan. You just want to collapse it a little bit. Shred your leaves. So for me, it's going to be the kawa, but for you, it's going to be the basil. So if we just roll those up and shred. And kawa is a beautiful herb. It's a lot of people make tea with it, but it's also lovely. It's just got a lovely, I suppose the way to describe the flavour is that it's green. It's really herbal. It's not grassy bitter. It's far more kind of aromatic and just, gorgeous. Just heat this up. The seaweed I used was dried, and I've just saved the liquid from that. So that just goes in here to be part of the dressing. So bring this to the boil. The fish you just take out here, and it's in the water, and I'm going to have a bit of the yellow fin, and I'll take a bit of
it all the way through. That's for tuna.
The joy of this way of doing it, when you plunge it into a bowl of ice water, is that it doesn't cook in the middle. It just cooks on the outside. And so visually you end up with a really lovely, let's see that, lovely.
That's gorgeous.
And if you were to sear the fish and then you just let it rest at room temperature, then what happens is the fish does keep cooking on the inside. So this is a way of halting that cooking. It sort of prevents it going too far. So we'll have a bit of the yellowfin tuna, and then we'll have a bit of the broadbill as well. These bits at the end will not be wasted. They will be much appreciated. Yeah. I've also got, New Zealand is famous for its kumara, the sweet potato. And these are these beautiful kumara grown on the marae where the kawa came from. The marae is sort of I suppose you could say it's a centre of Maoridom. It's where meetings happen. There's a wharekai where you eat food, and this particular marae has this fantastic garden, and they're growing all sorts of beautiful vegetables. They've got a practice where they repurpose fish heads and fish frames, so it's called ikakai, and there are a lot of fisher folk going out and coming back in, and you get a kilogram of fish and you take off the fillets and you throw the rest of the way. Well, that's just not done there. So they repurpose it and they give those fish heads and the frames to the community. And they also break the fish bones down and create a sort of a fertilizer. So it's a really sustainable practice that they've put in place. They've repurposed, I think, 27,000 tonnes.
Incredible. Okay, we're coming up to the end of our time. Can you kind of bring it all together for us? I'm so excited to see the end result.
I will, okay. We've got a little bit of lettuce out of our garden that I just picked earlier on. I've got salad, the warm salad goes on. So this is really aromatic. It's got lovely salty miso flavors. Put this in, garlic, ginger, and chili, and the pine nuts.
That looks gorgeous.
Goes on. Bit of tuna and yellowfin. Sorry, yellowfin tuna and the broadbill. And we just put a little bit of coriander on top. Whoop. And a little bit of yogurt, coconut yogurt. Just bring it all together. A little bit of acidity.
Wow.
And that's our little dish. I've made two, one for me and one for Richard.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you guys so much. This looks absolutely incredible. I wish I could be there to taste it with you. And thanks for tying in, sustainability and local food. And yeah, it was a great session. So thank you, gentlemen, very much. I think we're headed into a video now.
Thank you.
See ya.
Friends, Ali from the Republic of Palau. Palau is an archipelago with a landmass of just 450 square kilometers. But we are a large ocean state, responsible for 600,000 square kilometers of ocean. We're surrounded by the ocean, and it provides our food, shapes our culture, our history, and our economy. The ocean is central to our food system, and fishing is a part of our traditions. The truth is that I'm just a fisherman who has taken time out to serve my country as a political leader. But this tradition is under threat. Warming seas, overfishing, and pollution are all combining to undermine the health of our ocean. A degraded ocean is one that is less able to sustain humanity, and we will all be worse off for it. So, we have to protect the ocean in order to prosper from it. In Palau, we know this, and this is why we have been able to lead the way. 14 years ago, 5 Micronesian countries and territories launched the Micronesia Challenge, setting a goal of conserving 30% of our nearshore marine resources. Conserving coastal mangroves, for instance, supports fish nurseries. They allow mangrove crabs to thrive, sustaining our traditional diets. Further from shore, our Palau National Marine Sanctuary began its implementation phase at the beginning of this year. The sanctuary protects 500,000 square kilometers of ocean as a no-take marine protected area. It serves as a refuge in which marine life can recover from stresses, especially in a changing climate. The result will be larger and healthier fish stocks and richer marine biodiversity. A second phase of the sanctuary that we are working on is the development of an artisanal fishing industry in the remaining 20% of our exclusive economic zone. The domestic fishery shows the connection between protection, production, and prosperity. Healthier oceans strengthen our food security and resilience. They support jobs and livelihoods. And with the crisis that this pandemic has brought to our tourism sector, developing artisanal fishing can also diversify our economy. We are aiming for this artisanal fishing industry to also have a health benefit. Unfortunately, many Pacific islands are among the world's most obese countries. Our high rate of non-communicable disease is a health crisis due to an over-reliance on processed imports. The ocean can be a solution here too, by turning to seafood as a healthier, more nutritious source of protein. Pelagic fish have a big part to play in this, and increasing access to affordable, sustainable seafood is one part of our strategy to tackle our obesity crisis. Research commissioned this year by the High-Level Ocean Panel, which I co-chair with Norway, has highlighted the contribution of sustainable seafood production to a sustainable ocean economy. Investing in sustainable seafood, such as mariculture, has economic, environmental, and health benefits many times over to many sectors of society. They also provide a way to make our economic recoveries blue ones. My friends, ocean health is necessary for human health, and especially to build the resilience of our food systems. But this work to rescue ocean health needs to happen not just in Palau or the Pacific, but across our shared ocean of our planet. We are all ocean people, even if we do not live by the coast. In the political moments that lie ahead of us, in a new global biodiversity framework, the next UN Ocean Conference, and the UN's Food Systems Summit, we need to show a new level of ambition and action to rebalance humanity's relationship with the ocean. If Palau can do it, so can you. Together we can, and we must, for us and the next generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much from President of Palau, Tommy Remen Gesau. That was a very, very excellent video touching upon some of the difficulties between balancing the socioeconomic requirements of people like myself who live on the coast and depend on our marine and coastal areas for our livelihoods, but also ensuring that there is a percentage of our waters protected so that we can make sure that there is both fish and jobs for the future. And all of us who live on the Pacific and depend on the ocean from which we harvest our seafood and livelihoods, I think we can all agree that we need to come to a balance there. So now we're moving into a discussion with Dr. Smith and Dr. Torres. If I could invite you both to join us. Welcome.
Hello.
So
Hola.
I've given a brief description of you guys previously. I've got some questions for you, and I would love through these questions if you could sort of explore some of the topics you're researching and the work that you're engaged in. So I'm going to start out with Dr. Smith. Why do you think the ocean is so critical to human survival?
Yeah, great question, and one with many answers. So humanity is linked to the health of our oceans in so many ways. First and most obviously related to this conversation is as a really important source of protein, having been a primary source of protein for any culture that has lived adjacent to a coastline around the world for hundreds to thousands of years. Not only from a food perspective, but our humanity is intimately linked to the health of the ocean from the perspective of the ocean's ability to buffer climate. So the ocean is one of the biggest buffers of heat in the world, and it's what is allowing our climate to be somewhat stable, although we are seeing dramatic increases in instability associated with greenhouse gas emissions and warming. The ocean also absorbs a significant amount of the carbon dioxide that we're producing, and we have been producing since the Industrial Revolution. And so we would see even greater widespread climate change if the ocean wasn't doing this really important service. Of course, with that also comes consequences, things such as ocean acidification that you may have heard of, which can significantly impact certain fisheries and has shown examples specifically with things like oyster fisheries, where we've seen collapses associated with ocean acidification events. So, I mean, that's just a few, but everything is intimately linked. Obviously, our weather and our climate being buffered by the ocean is going to affect our ability to produce food around the world, whether it be in the ocean or on land. So really, the answers are big and broad.
Big question deserves a big answer, and I'm glad you touched on such a broad. There's so much there that I really want to dive deeply into, but I think I'll pose a question to Dr. Torre. Dr. Torres, you work with people like me, fishermen and their communities, and the importance of community involvement in ocean protection efforts. What are some of the challenges that you face, and what opportunities do you think exist to raise awareness around sustainability and also socioeconomic needs?
Thank you. Thank you, Ola. Working with communities is difficult, but also easy. Depends on how you approach to them. If you approach with your truth and saying you have to do this because it's good, then you will be doing something wrong. Your intervention is completely not good. But if you arrive to construct, to listen first, listen, learn. Communities in the oceans, they have been there for thousands of years. They already know what is a no-take zone. They already know what is sustainability because they depend on that. Unfortunately, with the pressures from outside, sometimes they start doing non-sustainable practices. But when you work with communities, you have to be very aware of your presence. You are an outsider and you are there to facilitate a process towards conservation. And also importance to include everybody. Is when you think in a fisherman, even people say fisherman, it's fisher. You think in a man with a net, but really the fisheries system is from the person extracting all the way to the plate. And half of the people there are women. And when you are in the decision-making tables, it's so common to see just men. We are forgetting women, we're forgetting the youth. So I think it just to work with communities, be aware of your presence, listen, and include everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Torres. I fully agree. As a woman and a youth in the fishing industry, I very much understand that sometimes it can be very difficult. I think the FAO reported in the SOFI report that only 14% of the workforce in fisheries are women. In the secondary or post-harvest production, half the harvesters are women, but there the labor is not often equitable. So how do you think we can help make space for women to be included in the conversation and to come to the table to not only be experiential learners, harvesting the fish at sea, but also have impact on high-level policies?
I think first is to level the participation. First is to empower, to provide tools, knowledge to the people that are not represented in the table, that women, like youth. Once a day, but we be very aware that we don't have to, don't forget the other people, because then you can finish with two completely polarized groups. So it's so important to work with masculinities, to talk with the fishermen, understand the situations. And the goal is to have gender equality in the decision-making tables, not just one group or the other group. And it's a process of construction.
Thank you. I especially would like to echo your sentiments about how important it is to work in that middle area with representation from science, from the conservation sector, and from fishermen. And even though it might be a difficult area to work from, none of us have all the answers. And I think all of us have all the questions. And we need to gather all the perspectives to make sure that our solutions are multifaceted and are representative of the people who are engaged in it. I've got a question for you, Doctor, or would you like to add something to that, Dr. Torres?
No,
okay.
If you want to.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, as President Ramin Gassau said, we all rely on the ocean, not just those of us who live on the coast. According to the World Resources Institute, wild capture fisheries with low fuel requirements boast some of the lowest carbon emissions of animal protein production. Greenhouse gas emissions are obviously a significant problem. And how do you think harvesting resources from the ocean can help our terrestrial animal protein mitigate some of these carbon emissions?
Yeah, great question. You know, I like to think about a lot of the problems and challenges that we're facing in society today as an opportunity for innovation and an opportunity for younger generations like yourselves to to find creative solutions. We have so many smart people in this world that care about conservation, not just with the ocean, but more broadly for the planet. And so there are really interesting, new, exciting innovations coming out of the ocean. For example, seaweeds, which are one of my favorite organisms on the planet. They're important for a number of reasons, not just food, but as a food resource, they are a superfood and perhaps one of the most healthy things we could be eating, which are vastly underutilized. So I'd like to encourage everybody to get out there and eat some seaweed. But more importantly, some species of seaweed produce compounds that have been found that when fed in very small quantities to livestock, they can actually prevent livestock from producing methane. So if you look at our food systems more broadly in agriculture, agriculture is one of the largest emitters of methane gas in the planet. And methane is a lot worse of a greenhouse gas in terms of its warming potential than carbon dioxide. So it's a pretty nasty greenhouse gas. But it sticks around in the atmosphere for a lot shorter. So we're talking maybe 10 to 12 years rather than hundreds to thousands of years with CO2. And it's a problem that we haven't had any reasonable solutions to address in the past, aside from reducing how many cows, sheep, and goats we have on the planet. So this one seaweed, known as Asparagopsis taxiformis, also limu kohu in Hawaiian culture, is a beautiful red seaweed, and it has this remarkable ability, again, when fed in very small quantities, to essentially eliminate or reduce methane emissions by up to 90% in these ruminant animals. So this is where there are solutions in the ocean with organisms like seaweed that could help solve a much bigger food systems issue and addressing greenhouse gas emissions at the same time. And so this is a pretty new and innovative solution, and I'm sure there are many more yet to be discovered solutions that the ocean holds for solving things like climate change, but also think about all the species that we're not currently utilizing for food production, for food resources, many lower trophic level species that can be really productive and are highly underutilized, in addition to the very lowest trophic level, the primary producers, the seaweeds, which again, I think are one of our most vastly underutilized resources in the ocean.
I think that is such an important concept. I think, humans sometimes can be creatures of habit, and we get stuck in familiar seafood or familiar things that we're choosing to eat. And I think it's so important to never stop exploring culinarily wise, try the new seaweeds, try different species of fish, not just the higher trophic levels, dive deep into those forage fish. So now I think we're moving into the online questions. I believe we might have some questions that were posed from people who are listening in. Oh, they're coming through YouTube now. I also have many more questions to ask you guys, but. Okay, it's loading. Here we go. As consumers, what can we do to reduce our environmental impact and support just and equitable practices across the seafood value chain? Now, who would like to answer that question?
We probably both have something to add. So Jorge, you want to go first?
I will say just ask. Ask when you are buying a product, any product. Ask from where is that product. Ask, know about a little bit behind that product. Who is fishing that? How is fishing? Just these days, the internet, you just Google everything, and it's a way to educate ourselves about the origins of the food. Ask. And just because I talk internet or Google, I just remember not everybody has internet. So just ask around. Ask the waiter or ask the chef.
I think that's so important. That reinforces that to restaurants and to grocery stores that you care about where your food is coming from. Dr. Smith?
Yeah, that's pretty much the same point I was going to make. Just I'll echo it a little bit more loudly, is that, when we oftentimes go to the grocery store and we buy vegetables, or if we eat meat, we want to buy organic, we want to, grass-fed or whatever, if we have that opportunity. But the same decisions aren't often made for fish because they're not marketed in the same way. And so people just buy the halibut or buy the salmon without necessarily thinking about where it comes from. And if we want to have a chance of reducing our carbon footprint in our own individual food system, we need to support local fisheries. We need to support local farmers. We need to hold whoever we're purchasing those fish from accountable for convincing us that they were sustainably caught, either from a fisheries perspective or from a harvest perspective. And, I think the closer we get to the actual source of the fish, we get to meet people like you, and then we are excited to support you and your family because you guys have such a great story, and we know you're harvesting sustainably, and we can read about it. And there are more and more of these examples, I think, popping up around. Here in the US, we have, these fish farmers markets where the fishermen come to the dock once a week, and you can actually interact with them and buy the fish direct. But I think holding our wholesalers and retailers accountable for being able to share those stories with us so that we can make informed decisions, because I certainly don't want to support an unsustainably, sourced fish or fish product.
Yeah, and I think that's where eco labels play a really important part. They do a lot of the research that we can't do. I'm a fisherman. I know where I caught my fish, but it's really difficult for the average consumer to know where it comes from, especially as Dr. Torres pointed out, internet is a privilege.
Right.
So do you think, I'm going to ask you both the same question, but I'll start with Dr. Torres. Do you think that people living in urban areas are disconnected to where their food comes from? You think they've ever met a fisherman?
Yeah, and I have a story one time, long time ago. I asked a person from my family if he liked the sea, and the person said he's from the city, and he said, "Yeah, I love the sea without anything that is sticky and completely disconnected." And the way that we can start connecting both is just to ask, to listen, and to visit the places.
And I think that is one thing that I'm looking forward to the most, is visiting some of these places when some of these travel restrictions and our current situation has shifted. So the same question to you, Dr. Smith. Do you think people living in urban areas are disconnected from our food producers?
From having an understanding / appreciation for the ocean and all of the resources and why they should necessarily care. They don't live adjacent to the coastline. I get a lot of questions like, why should I care about coral reefs? I live in the middle of the country and I don't ever get to interact with coral reefs. So why should it matter? But I think through more and more education, communication, outreach, and honestly, I feel like strangely in this time of COVID, we've had more opportunity to connect with people in places we wouldn't necessarily, because we're behind our screens so much and we're doing, cross-country educational programs. So I think in some ways we've had a chance, like this event, for example, connecting with people all around the world to share these important stories and to make sure people understand that the ocean is integral to our survival as a human race.
Yeah, I don't think we can stress that enough. There's one ocean and we all depend on it, not only for our nutrition, but for our climate regulation and for many, many other reasons. A sense of wonder and beauty is not the least of one of those valuable gifts it gives to us. So we talk about sometimes there's a disconnect between harvesters and consumers. And often as a fisherman, I get a lot of people come ask me questions, the ocean is overfished and all this stuff. But according to the 2020 SOFI report, it shows that the majority of seafood actually comes from biologically sustainable fish populations. Why do you think there is so much misconception around the fishing industry worldwide? Why do you think fisheries statistics are misperceived and miscommunicated? Dr. Smith, I'll pose that to you first.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with some unfortunate earlier stories where we did have catastrophic overfishing and massive collapses of very large and important fisheries. And that ethos kind of stuck around for a long time, just in people's minds, kind of like how salmon aquaculture in some cases has soured the entire conversation about aquaculture, regardless of what species or where it is. And so that's part of, my career, my job is to try to re-educate people that, in the US, our fisheries are actually doing quite well. We learned from some pretty bad examples, and we have set up some pretty stringent regulations. There are certainly places around the world where that's not the case, and we're still learning and adapting. But I think it's trying to get rid of these bad narratives that have soured the conversation for decades. So I think that's part of all of our jobs, actually, is to communicate that we have success stories and we need to share those, because that's what people want to hear.
I think that's so important as somebody who is a youth and who sometimes gets overwhelmed with a lot of the stuff that's going on today in our world. I feel very helpless and I feel like I'm not making a difference. But learning more about what sustainable fisheries are and how your food choices can drive systemic change globally, worldwide, I think that puts a lot of power back to people like me and other people who sometimes might feel helpless. Dr. Torres, we are coming up on the end of our question session, but I'm going to pose that same question to you. Why do you think people have a misconception about fish harvesters? There's a nice gender neutral term, fish harvesters and aquaculture.
I think in these days, there are so much news, famous fake news, that is so easy to mislead the people. Also, there is a generation of people that are stuck in the 70s and thinking that the fisheries are in that way. And in these days that everybody's, living in this pandemic, we need to see the good things, the good solutions, the good examples, because it's so easy to go to the sad part. Don't be naive, but see the good things that we are doing as a humanity, as people. There are fisheries in good shape, or in the way to be in good shape, but also to understand that the fisheries that are not in good shape is because there's a story behind. It's not because someone wake up every morning thinking, I'm going to do something bad for the ocean. As a fisher, I don't think you wake up saying, oh, I'm going to kill. No, it's a way of living. It's a culture. And we have to understand and respect every person and respect the time. People want to do good things. We need to move to that direction.
I think that's so powerful. I think the majority of people in this world want to make the world a better place. We might disagree on how to do that, but it's so important to focus on where we're making progress, where we are winning some of the battles against malnutrition, childhood stunting, and obesity around the world. But also to recognize that we have room to improve. We can do better and we should do better. But we need to give, ourselves a break and make sure that we celebrate our accomplishments. So thank you both. I had such a great time talking with you, and I hope we continue this conversation behind the scenes. I'm going to invite Paul back into this conversation, and he's going to move us on to the next segment. So thank you. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's so great to hear and be able to join this engaging conversation around some of the interconnections between our lives and our oceans. Going beyond what we usually discuss for biodiversity, it's just been an absolute pleasure to start in the kitchen talking about seafood and actually getting to enjoy it and smell it. I smelt those wafts coming through, but then also just starting to think about some of the misconceptions. Yeah, I'm very jealous there, Richard. But thank you to Friends of the Ocean, to all of you for hosting this great conversation. And we're looking forward to think as we continue to go into this next decade, how we transform our food systems, because oceans are going to have to play a large role in these conversations. And so we need to be listening to the experts, listening to people that are engaging to help us to know where to go. So as we go forward, we're going to be starting another hour coming up. This is part of the Voices of the Food System session. And this is tied to a year-long conversation leading into the UN Food Systems Summit, which is going to be happening towards the end of 2021. But it doesn't happen just then. This is a summit that starts now. And so it's starting with these conversations. We've already heard from heads of state. We've heard from chefs, from fisher people, from scientists, from farmers. And it's really great. And so I want to encourage you, if you're a farmer, a student, a chef, a foodie, you can get involved. And in this video break, we're going to learn a little bit about how you can become a food system hero. So thank you, guys.
Thank you for bringing your voice to the 24 Global Leader Conversation on Food Systems. The global conversation represents so much of what we hope the coming year will be about. Many people from different walks of life are coming together to engage in solutions-oriented dialogues and to address the roots of what we want to achieve over the next 10 years. Our vision is to make this a people's summit, giving voice to citizens in every country of the world. With its activities spread over more than a year, the summit will bring together key players from the world of science, business, policy, healthcare, academia, as well as farmers, indigenous people, youth organizations, consumer groups, environmental activists, everyone, including you. I believe we can all find common ground in which we can grow a sustainable future together. We already know what we want the future to look like. We have the Sustainable Development Goals to guide us and to support how we will measure our progress in achieving the future. Food is the instrument that touches all our lives, and through its lens, we can realize this vision of a better world. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food system is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Join us today. Join the Food System Summit. Join the conversation. Join the global dialogue we are launching today and over the course of the coming year. And together, I'm very confident we can build a just and resilient world where no one is left behind.
systems that bring food to our tables have a profound impact on our economies, our health, and the environment. Food systems are one of the main reasons we are failing to stay within our planet's ecological boundaries. But they can also be the key to tackling the climate crisis, addressing soaring biodiversity loss, and building healthier societies. This year, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the fragility of our food systems. Millions more people are hungry, and millions of jobs have been lost. Meanwhile, the climate emergency continues apace. To address these issues, I'm convening a Food System Summit next year. This will be a People Summit and a Solutions Summit. This action-oriented conversation will come together in two key moments. The first will be a pre-summit meeting in Rome in early summer next year. This meeting will build on inclusive country and regional dialogues and will define bold actions for inclusive and sustainable food systems. The second will be the Food System Summit itself to bring the attention of all world leaders to this issue. We need global engagement and action for inclusive and sustainable food systems. I urge you to join the conversation.
Everyone in the world has gone to bed one night or another with fear or pain or loss. And yet each of us has awakened, arisen, somehow made our ablution, seen other human beings, and said, "Morning, how are you?"
Hi, namaste. Ciao. Good morning. Hola.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust. I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes. Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. I rise. We rise.
Welcome to the Good Food for All session. My name is Paul Newnham. I'm the director of the Sustainable Development Goal 2 Advocacy Hub, which works to bring together actors around UN, private sector and civil society to drive action on Sustainable Development Goal 2, which covers the areas of food, agriculture, and nutrition. And so we are super excited to be hosting this session. We've just had two amazing sessions with such great content, and we're super excited for the conversation that we're going to have now. We work a lot in helping connect food with what people are doing every day, and then how we need to make change based on science outcomes. We're fighting for progress, people and planet, and seeing how good food can be a foundation for everything that provides not only the energy we need to fight for a better future everywhere, but also to drive progress in our world. And so we're celebrating World Food Day. This is the third session of a 24-hour global relay conversation that's gathering diverse voices from all over the world, from ag tech to chefs to climate activists. And this is really important because the food system touches everything. It touches all of the big challenges we face. And so we need everyone to come in and be a part of the solution. And so we're going to have a discussion today about what good food means. I'm coming from Melbourne, Australia, but we're going to be going from Australia and beyond. And we have people coming in from all over the region. And so what we're going to be doing is having a conversation about what good food looks like. If you're on social media, we're going to hope to have some time for questions at the end. So I'd love for you to get in the chat, put some questions in, share your thoughts on voices for the food system with the hashtag so that we can get this message out there, and get involved, follow on social, the different channels as well, so that you can keep in touch over the coming year with this summit. So we've got a short video which we're going to play, which just talks a little bit about what good food for all is. So if we can cue that video, we're going to go there and then we're going to get straight into it with our first guest. Well, it's great to be back on. So to kick off this session and to kick off this conversation on good food for all, I'm going to invite a great advocate and good friend, Dr. Sandro DeMeo, the CEO of Vic Health. He's also a cookbook author and all-round nice guy. And so we're going to ask Sandro if you can join us, and we wanted to get you to come on. And how are you going?
G'day, Paul. I'm doing very well. Good to see you again.
Great to see you too. So what I've asked is, I'd love you to do a bit of a recap of what's happening in this part of the world around good food for all. You touch so many different areas with your TV show, with your work at Vic Health, with your foundation, with your cookbook.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm exhausted already. But tell us a little bit of what you see happening at the moment in the food system.
I'd love to, Paul. And first of all, just a big congratulations to you and the team. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land I'm on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the Indigenous Koori Victorians, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, but also really bring attention to the incredible strong food culture that Indigenous people in this part of the world have had for more than 60,000 years. So important to our future and such a big part of our past. Yeah, absolutely. Look, food, it's World Food Day. And while many of us globally and here in Victoria are focused on coronavirus and the global pandemic, I would say that, look, this World Food Day is the most important that there has ever been. And if we think for a moment about the past, the present, and the future, if we look at where we've come from food, we live in a world that's never been richer, and we've heard a number of times over the last 24 hours, a world that has never been richer, and yet global hunger is once again on the rise. More than 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. More than 2 billion wake up overweight or obese, struggling to access affordable, healthy diets. Many countries around the world are facing what we call a new nutrition reality, this coexistence of multiple forms of malnutrition. As countries go through economic transition, individuals are born in countries, even in our region, Malaysia, Indonesia, they're born into countries where it's very hard to find food early in life. Kids are continuing to not have enough food for many years across the early stages of life, so much so that it has lifelong impacts on their health and well-being. But by the time they become adults, the food world that they're living in looks so very different. It's become commodified, homogenized, and globalized. And you're seeing this influx of food products, of ultra-processed foods, of junk foods. And so you end up with large numbers of adults living with overweight and obesity, and yet you have children continuing to face hunger. On top of this, of course, we know that food, and we've heard this a number of times, food is a major driver of many of our major environmental challenges worldwide, and they're not going away, and the curves are not pointing in the right directions. Whether it's ocean depletion, whether it's eutrophication, whether it's land conversion, water use, CO2, methane, the list goes on. So many of them come back to the way we produce, process, transport, consume, and of course, waste food. But in the midst of coronavirus, I really think, Paul, this year there is such an opportunity. There is such an opportunity for us as a global community to set a new vision. A new vision, not only, there's an opportunity to reset. It's such a tough time for so many people around the world. And COVID has changed not only every aspect of the way we live and work, but of course, it's also fundamentally shaken every aspect of the way we produce, consume, and waste food. Whether it's access to farms and people moving freely between countries to be able to pick food, whether it's the working conditions of people in abattoirs or spaces where food is processed. Whether it's the way, the revolution of our food systems becoming digitalized that has just been so incredibly accelerated by coronavirus. Everything we do now is on a digital screen, and increasingly in middle income and lower middle income markets, it's exactly the same. Wet markets are going digital in so many emerging economies. And then of course, the food, the way that we're actually producing or even cooking food at home. We've seen some silver linings. Many of us are cooking more. At the peak of lockdown worldwide, sourdough recipe was one of the most Googled thing on the planet. People were all getting back in the kitchen and wanting to re-engage with food, an amazing opportunity. But there are also so many risks. Food waste, so many parts of the food sector, smallholder farmers across the planet being pushed back into poverty because of coronavirus and the indirect consequences. So I think going into 2021, the opportunity, as you say, science, the chefs, the consumers, the entrepreneurs, everyone's ready. Now's the opportunity, I think, to really think about, let's build back better when it comes to our food system. Let's think of a food system that is fairer, healthier, more sustainable. Let's not just go back to 2019 world. Let's really use this to fast track our path to sustainable development. Let's achieve our vision of leaving no one behind, and let's once and for all truly unlock the full power on our plates for people and planet.
Sandra, absolutely agree. This is this ambition that you're putting forward is exactly what the Food System Summit's about. It's looking for those game-changing initiatives, and that's why the Secretary General called this summit to really bring this kind of ambition, because we're not moving fast enough on the transformation that we need, and COVID has just accelerated it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the culmination of those opportunities, Paul. 2021 Food System Summit, I think COVID has made it even more important. It is the culmination of science, of markets, of changing markets, of consumers. Everyone wants a better, healthier future. And I think 2021 has to be our line in the sand. It has to be the moment we look back from 2050 and say, that is when everything changed. That is when we really got on and created a better world through food.
Preach it. It's amazing. Thank you for setting this up. So today's conversation, what we want to do is really start accelerating that. We want to highlight some of the people that are doing that and some of the people that are engaging. You are in the kitchen, and it's amazing during COVID, because what we get to do is, if this wasn't COVID time, you'd be probably in a professional kitchen, but you're actually in your home, a kitchen. We get to come into people's homes.
In my home.
And you're at home with your slippers on, which is absolutely awesome, because this connects us. It shows how things work. So I'm going to kind of connect this conversation around food. We're going to start with some cooking. And I'm going to invite Chef Peggy Chan to join us. It's great that we can see what you're going to do. It looks like you've been a bit busy already. Chef Peggy Chan is coming live from Hong Kong. She is the founder of the Grassroots Initiative Consultancy, and she's a member of the Chefs Manifesto, which is a network of chefs working on the Sustainable Development Goals around 80 countries in the world. And she's going to bring this discussion right down to the plate, from her home kitchen to your home kitchen, Sandro, while we're having this conversation. So Peggy, can you just introduce yourself, and also just what are you going to be cooking up today, and where did that recipe come from?
Sure. So honored to be here with everyone. My name's Peggy. I'm from Hong Kong. You're here in my tiny little kitchen. Today I'm bringing a dish that is very much inspired from where I grew up in Montreal, as well as in Hong Kong. There's a really big Vietnamese culture. And so what we do is we're really working on different ingredients, from Vietnamese to superfoods, and also Chinese traditional medicinal ingredients. So in Hong Kong, actually, over 97% of food is imported. So when you talk about a resilient city, this is not it. So another thing we need to know is that even though we come off as such a metropolis, vibrant city, and a very rich city, 1 out of 5 people are actually living under poverty line here in Hong Kong. And so not a lot of people can actually afford going out to dine in fancy places and eat foie gras every day. So we're very lucky that there are places like wet markets, and also really specialty stores like traditional Chinese stores, where we can get ingredients that are really low value, but actually so high in value in terms of nutrition. And so one of those ingredients, and I'm going to show you right here. I'm going to get into the dish now.
Awesome.
Can I just say, Paul, I've been cooking Peggy's stew, doing a bit of prep for the last hour or so, and it smells amazing in here. Peggy's food, the smells and scents. I feel like a little bit of Peggy's apartment is right here in Melbourne. It's incredible.
That's amazing. Look at that. Look at that. So what have we got, Peggy?
Here, some ingredients that are sourced from the traditional Chinese medicinal stores. So we have here goji berries, which a lot of people already currently use, super high in antioxidants. Some ingredients here, dried cinnamon bark, as well as star anise, very warming spices that helps blood flow and is, again, also really high in antioxidants. Then we have here black cardamom. So this is generally used in like Nepalese and Bhutanese, as well as Indian cuisine. And in Chinese medicine, we also use this to treat digestive issues, and it's extremely anti-inflammatory as well. We also have some warming spices like clove. And here you see, this is what we call a carrier root, or carrier medicine root. So we call the Sichuan lavage root, and in Cantonese, we call it chun gong. So, essential oils, there are carrier oils like almond and jojoba. This is what we call carrier root, because if you pair this with different types of ingredients like astragalus root, or something else like a dried bark, or an herb, it actually gives you different treatments and treats different illnesses. So this is really good for pain relief, and promotes blood circulation as well.
Wow.
And of course, I always season with the most mineral-rich ingredients. So here we have some pure Himalayan pink salt with over 80 types of bioavailable minerals. And then you can see the rest of the spread here. Tons of protein, tons of veggies, tons of fiber for ingredients absorption. So yeah, are we ready?
Awesome. It looks good. So I mean, this is amazing. You've talked about warming ingredients. There's so much biodiversity just in what you've shown, and knowing how these ingredients interact with the body is really important because, you know, you mentioned Chinese medicine, but, you know, I know, Sandra, you've talked about food being medicine. You're a medical doctor. It's really interesting to think about the connection between what we eat and the ingredients, and then also our own health. And so this brings together so many elements in that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Paul. I mean, if you think about it, so as a doctor, food, unhealthy diets, so the bad side, unhealthy diets are one of the leading risk factors in many countries, the leading risk factor for disease worldwide. We went from a situation in mid-20th century where food was such a powerful extender of the quality and quantity of lives around the world to now being such a challenge to health. But when you really get down to the molecular level, I mean, it makes sense. What we put in our mouths, what we eat, what we have access to, what we can afford, the quality of that literally is the building block of every cell in our body. What we consume is what is then going to actually, you know, dictate the health across every organ, every system within our body. And so really, you know, when it comes to eating good food, eating nutritious food, really making sure that fruit and veg and the diversity of fruit and veg, whether it's for your gut or for your skin or for your heart, everything comes back to, you know, a really high quality, diverse, plant forward, fresh diet. Now, the issue with that is obviously not many people on the planet can't afford or don't have access to that. And that's what we need to try and get on and fix. But certainly if we could increase access to healthy diets around the world, make that a universal right as it is and it truly can be, you know, the health benefits for billions of people would be enormous.
So we're going to be moving over to a panel shortly, but Chef Peggy, I've just shared out on Twitter at the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, and on my own Twitter, I've retweeted it, the recipe that you're using in case people want to take this and have a go at it later at home. So we've kind of made we took a bit of liberty and shared some of your secrets there, but I would love for people to be able to kind of take a look at that and maybe try and make it. But can you just give us a quick summary of what you're going to work on for the next little while we're talking in the panel? Because we're going to then come back to you at the end and see how it comes together. So what's the process?
For sure. So to make any broth, really, it's pretty easy. Throw everything into a pot and add some water in there. But it needs love.
Oh, I like it.
So we're also adding a bit of daikon. Daikon helps kind of cool down the broth because there are so many warming spices here. So we're going to put everything into a pot. So Sandro, super easy, just throw it in. And then in the meantime, we're also going to blanch some of these brown rice noodles and also get the shiitake mushrooms in there. We got some tofu and bok choy. So all of that doesn't take long at all to cook. So this, it takes about 20 minutes to finish the entire dish, to be honest.
Wow.
And then we're also make a Vietnamese fish sauce using brown rice vinegar and coconut sugar.
Awesome. So I'm gonna leave you and Sandro to cook. We're gonna keep your videos on, but we're gonna put you on mute. But you guys can find another way to talk thanks to technology. And I'm going to move to another part of our conversation, but I'm going to come back to you guys later because I'm really keen to see these final dishes. And I want you to describe what it smells like. I want you to have a bit of a taste. And so before the end of the session, I think we might even do a bit of a judging between our panelists on which one is presented best. So I think, Sandro, you've got your work cut out for you. I know you have a cookbook, but you know, Peggy, I've seen
I'm in trouble.
magic, and I think you're in trouble. So you guys, if you guys start cooking and chuck yourselves on mute for the moment, I'm going to continue on, and we're going to bring in a few others. So there's a whole bunch of other great work happening in this region to tackle some of the issues that Sandro highlighted. And so I wanted to invite our panelists to join us. And I wanted to hear from each of them to talk a little bit about what they're doing to deliver good food to our plates. So if our panelists can turn their videos on and their audio, we'll get going. So we're going to have a nice full screen. So I think we've got Paula and Roman joining. Okay, Roman and Paula. I think she's coming. So it's super great to have you guys with us. I hope you're as excited. I know watching along, it's making me hungry. It's kind of lunchtime in this part of the world. And so, you know, seeing all those great ingredients, hearing chefs talking about that, but also hearing some of the challenge, I'm super excited to have you guys here. So we're going to make this a fairly interactive, quick fire conversation. So what I'm going to do is just see if you can start out with just a quick fire introduction. What's your name, where you're from, and where you're dialing in from. And so let's get started. So Param, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Paul, and very excited to be part of this conversation. Good afternoon, morning, evening to all listeners, wherever you are in the world. I'm Param, founder and chief executive at MoveFarm, where we are building connected commerce for India's 100 million dairy farmers and ensure nutritious milk for over 1 billion people. Since the launch last year in 2019, we are now currently working with 23,000 dairy farmers. We have partnered with the Government of India, the Animal Husbandry Department, large global giants like Unilever, and as well as milk cooperatives. The farmers who work with us have reported 90% increase in their knowledge for dairy management practices, 20% increase in milk production, and overall savings of about 30% in India. So I'm very excited, and I look forward to this session with all of you. Thank you.
That's great. I'm looking forward to digging in a bit more, Param. They're big numbers, and I know dairy industry in India is big impact as well. So it's great to have you with us. Okay, Mark.
Thanks, Paul. Mark Peter Nataris from the Timor-Leste Food Lab and Agora Food Studio based in Dili, Timor-Leste. I have to say, not only am I excited, but I'm kind of salivating watching what's going on the other video there. It's making me a bit, hungry. But what I wanted to say was we've had the pleasure of being part of the Chef's Manifesto, the SDG2 Advocacy Hub since 2018. And we've really seen this movement grow, and I can just see the momentum building. And what we'd like to do throughout today's panel is just share some of our approaches, which are really based around taste and love, and just making everything super fun and approachable for people. So thanks again for including us, Paul, and the team.
I love it. Yeah, I agree with you. Watching these ingredients, it kind of makes your mind keep jumping to what you are wanting for lunch. But the words love, I think, is just such a key thing for us to remember about food. Food is something that does connect joy. You can see it even in the face of the guys cooking. It's the way our families come together. So it's great to bring that out, and let's dig into that. Paula, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. So it's an honor to be here with you all. I'm Paula Torres. I'm from Timor-Leste Food Lab and Agora Food Studio. My role as a food innovation and project manager. What normally we do here, we always work as a team, and we try to promote local products and food innovation. And we are here like from different districts. Like myself, I'm from Bikeke, Watulari. My mother tongue is Makasai, and we are here like we bring our own ancestor food, and then we try to use our own skills and knowledge to do innovation and then creativity of the food. And we also train young generation. Like this year, we try to, like myself and my team, we train young people to be next young generation, or be next young generation for tourism entrepreneurs. And this year also, we also focus on train other young people to do innovation noodles, like here. I just saw it here. So we also.
Oh wow!
So we had different noodles here. So these are the reason we do these noodles. We create noodles because in Timor-Leste, like I know some of country as well, but in Timor-Leste we are here like most of us from child until all like elders like that. We know like noodles is chemicals food and not good for our health, but we always we know that, but we still keep eating every day. So that's why like our team we come up with this idea to do use our own local products like pumpkin, moringa, and sweet potato that have the value of nutrition level, and we do innovation this one. So slowly, not directly, but slowly can change every people style of eating noodles. Instead of they use chemical one, they can use the local and then healthy one. Yeah,
Thanks,
this
Paula.
and then another one.
Yeah,
so
that's great. Well, I might come back to you in a second, Paula. I'm going to just get Roman to introduce himself, and then I'm going to come back and hear a little bit more about the other one. Roman.
Hi, everybody. My name's Roman Davis-Fay. It's a real pleasure to be here on World Food Day. Thanks so much for having me. I'd first like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains in South Australia, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and recognise their ongoing connection to country and the importance of Indigenous wisdom across the world in creating sustainable solutions within our future food systems. I'm the founder of Climate Proof Food, a platform dedicated to building connections between plate and planet. This means educating others about our food systems, what we can do as individuals to make sustainable food choices in the age of a climate crisis, and how we can use our consumer dollar to drive change and positive impact. I've also been selected as the UN NGCY Regional Youth Focal Point for Australia and the Pacific Islands in support of the United Nations Food Systems Summit. So in the lead up, I'll be aiming to facilitate engagement among young people across the region and help empower them to transform our food systems. Thanks so much for having me. Can't wait for the rest of the conversation.
Absolutely. Great to have you with us. So I'm going to I've asked each of you to come up with 2 words on what a future with a transformed food system would look like wherever you're focused. So I want 2 words from each of you. And let's see if we can get these down. If we get 2 words from each of you, I think that gets 140 characters almost. We'll be able to tweet that out and share that with everyone. So let's hear what words you guys came up with. Paula, did you have a couple of words, 2 words?
Say it again.
Did you have 2 words about what a future transformed food system would look like? Or do you want?
Okay, let me try. So this is really good question. I come up with 2 words. 2 words: local, local food, and local food and high nutrition level.
Yes, so local and nutritious. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Roman, do you want to go next?
Very hard decision to just pick 2 words, but I went for resilient and regenerative. So they're able to withstand shocks and unforeseen disturbances, much like anything coming from climate change or the pandemic, but they're also more than sustainable. They're improving the overall health of our people and the planet.
Wow, thank you. Mark, over to you.
So tough. Tasty.
Yes.
It's got to be tasty. And I think compassionate. Food choices have to be compassionate.
Interesting. And Pran?
I'm the lucky last. I think, I would go for 3. The transformed food system should be where we all are aware, what we are eating. Is it healthy? So awareness is very important. Second is access. Do we have access to quality food for everyone, for the riches and the poor around the world? We still live in a planet in 21st century with all technology around us, but we do not been able to feed everyone. And the last that I took the liberty is accountability. So for very important, we are all accountable in the transformed food system. So the three words are awareness, access, and accountability. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, guys. I mean, that was a tough, it's very tough. But what I love about those words is, you know, food, we all come at food from a different perspective. And it means different things to everyone. And this is part of the reason why the food system is so important. And it's so important for us to dialogue about this. In our world, we too often don't dialogue, we just broadcast, we just speak, but we don't listen and engage with one another. But even hearing in this conversation the different perspectives is part of that dialogue. So we're just going to dive straight into some more conversation. So I'm just going to start with you, Mark. So production to consumption, what are some of the challenges in Timor-Leste, and just tell us a little bit about how Agora was kind of responding to that.
I think, yeah, thanks, Paul. So when we commenced in 2016, we saw that there weren't any places in the country that were focused on promoting local food. And the disconnect was that there was a lot of local food. It's all really tasty and organic, but it just hadn't been linking to the market. And so I think the central challenge in a way wasn't actually even a logistical challenge. It was actually people's own value and trust in their own food. So it's a very, it's a psychological issue more than an actual physical agricultural issue. And so we're sort of, I guess, been passionately walking along this road of bringing sexy back to what people already have. And so I want to echo the views and the thoughts of Robert Oliver from the 2 sessions before, who was saying that the resources are already there. The stories are already there. The food is delicious. It's tasty. It's organic. It's not about trying to create something new necessarily, but it's about reframing what people already have and making it sexy. I can't think of a better word than that. And the other word that comes up again and again is making it tasty. And taste has to be central to the change. Yeah.
And just while I'm with you, Mark, one of the things that I was really impressed by that you and the Agora team did was really demonstrate how sustainability can be measured and shown. And I think you've got, I'd love you just to put on screen quickly, if you're able to, just the dashboard, and just for, give us 30 seconds on what this was about.
Cheers, Paul. So yeah, the food impact dashboard, which we've been communicating through to the Chefs Manifesto group about, is really a way of articulating how very small changes that we make can have a big impact. So for example, our decision we're a social enterprise, but of course we have to, be sustainable. So our decision to move towards 100% local in our food, and particularly in our lunch meals, means that we can show after a few years almost 40,000 meals only with local food, and then we can quantify that in a figure, which is our investment into the local agricultural economy. And we're a restaurant that only seats 40 people. So just by visualizing this, we get also consumers and customers coming back to us saying, hey, we really want to validate what you're doing. We're going to eat here twice a week instead of once a month. So what we really want to do is share this approach for other people to copy. And I'll just say one more thing about it, which is it's also a way to realize the SDGs. So we link each of the indicators you see on the screen there to particular SDGs.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. So using some of the technology, I'll come across to you, Param. In India, is there similar kind of challenges to what Mark shared? And how did I know you've been working with dairy farmers, particularly you've got a new project with female dairy farmers in India. What are you trying to tackle, and can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing that?
I think I love the word Mark said, making food sexy. I think that's great, Mark. The challenges in India are on a different scale. Sometimes I feel just with the sheer number of people involved in the dairy sector. So if you look at 100 million people in the dairy in India, 80% of India's milk production is unorganized still. So I think the biggest challenge for us is how do we ensure the dairy farmers are part of the organized sector in the dairy. So that's one. And then ensuring that they have access to quality doctors, veterinarians, they have access to financial resources that they need, they have access to insurance. So these are some of the key challenges that we are facing in India, and we're coming up with the connected commerce solution for the farmers. My story working with the dairy farmers, especially in women dairy farmers, is a unique. When I sold my company here in Australia, my big ambition was how do we enhance 100 million lives by 2030. So I went to India, and I make myself available for the whole country. Anyone can actually hire me for free. And I end up in a United Nations development program working, on a project in rural Haryana, where we were training these women on entrepreneurship as part of the UN program. And every day we were training, and I had my now co-founder, Ashna. She came from London School of Economics, and she was equally passionate. And she said, yeah, we need to help these women. And every day we go there, we said, can we train you on entrepreneurship, on skills, how to access market? And they would say, sorry, we have to go back to home to feed a cow. We said, okay, that's great. How about tomorrow? The next day they have to give water to the cow. The next day they have to milk the cow. And we said, like, we came here, what is this cow thing in India? And that was the first time I actually came across that there are 300 million cows in India. On average, these women, if you talk about Indian women, some studies say up to 92% of the animal husbandry work in India is done by women. So how do we bring those women at the forefront of the dairy? How do we ensure digital inclusion for these women? How do we ensure, if you talk about India's number, 92% work done by female, less than 10% have access to internet. Less than 5% own a large animal cow. And this is where at MoveFarm, I think as first, like I said before, the food systems transformation I see as awareness, access, and accountability. But for us, the current present pillar is access. We are ensuring through our Project Dawn initiative, even though 400 farmers are joining our platform daily, still only 3% of the farmer are women farmers joining the platform. So you can imagine from a Project Dawn initiative, which is dairy, agriculture, women, and nutrition. Why nutrition? In India, 189 million people are malnutrition, 20% of the world's milk. Where are our food systems going? How do we ensure that food systems are not broken? We have seen in pandemic, in the COVID situation, where farmers were also throwing milk on the streets.
Wow.
But then next door young child who is hungry, how do we ensure that women who are providing nutritious food, not only in India, globally, are we actually bring them in the forefront? And that is what MoveFarm believes in, to ensure that these women have access to smartphone, they have access to internet, they have access to qualified veterinarians, they can raise their queries on the platform, they have solutions to those queries, they have access to finance so that they can actually own a cow. Can large private banks can come forward and say, we can actually give subsidized interest loans for women if they own a cow. So we can actually change the equation for someone who's 92% involved in the sector, but less than 5% own a cow. So I think at MoveFarm, we're very passionate about women to become the front driver on the dairy sector and help the planet. Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Param. And it's so important when you talk about the scale, but also you talk about the impact. And I think this is really critical. So, one of the things when I was talking to you about the work that you're doing, there is this climate element as well, because cows, if they're healthy and they're engaged, they can also improve their climate impact. And I'm going to jump across to you, Roman, and ask you to talk a little bit about the work. You're obviously very much thinking about climate, and you're thinking very much about what's going on in Australia. And so I just wanted you to maybe give us a bit of a feel for some of the top challenges and actions that we need to deliver for good food for all in Australia.
Thanks, Paul. I really have to say I really agree with Param saying access is such a really important part. Like in Australia, we're one of the world leaders in food availability as an export-orientated nation, but it doesn't mean we don't have access problems which come from a whole range of aspects. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted the vulnerability of our systems to disruption, and also provided an ongoing insight to the threat posed by the climate crisis and other shocks such as the bushfires earlier this year. And that poses a threat to our nutritional security and our collective health as well. So I'll farmers are already struggling to cope with more frequent intense droughts and changing weather patterns, which are then being exacerbated by further by unhealthy, unsustainably produced food. So there we have a problem where our people's connection with food is being interrupted by these unforeseen disturbances that I mentioned earlier. So we first need to prepare our farmers. We need to support them with fair wages so they're able to adopt both climate and nature-friendly production practices so that they then have the capacity to cope with more extreme weather events. So this would mean prioritizing regenerative or diversified farming systems that ideally draw down carbon, boost biodiversity, but then improve resilience through a variety of crops. And going on that, we've always been a country of fire and flood. So we also need to recognize the importance of First Nations wisdom and knowledge and the role that Indigenous land management practices can play in mitigating these challenges. On access as well, we know that 70% of Australians are going to be living in cities by 2027. So this highlights the need for maybe a more transition towards a more local, diversified food system, which would then provide triple bottom line benefits for people, planet, and pockets. So urban and peri-urban agriculture can increase food security by supporting provision of healthy food, clean environments, and building stronger local economies as well. Urban ag can reduce the threat of to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. And they also act as great urban spaces for community education about more sustainable and healthy consumption. I think touching on access once more, we need greater support for our food relief organisations, which have been exhausted during this. Someone's got their someone speaking.
Hey Joel, I can hear you.
Food relief organisations dedicated to tackling food insecurity. We've seen that our biggest one, Food Bank, has struggled to meet demands for an estimated 2 million Australians dependent on food annually. We've also recently heard that we've had renters skipping meals to afford rent during the pandemic. So that we've got enough food, it's just making sure that it's available for people to consume and also that it's healthy. So we probably assume more than enough calories, but whether or not people are receiving adequate nutrition is another story. Finally,
Thanks,
go for it. The average Australian has an ecological footprint of 4 times greater than the globally available fair share. So it puts us in the top 5 consuming nations. So, and on top of that, we also waste around 30% of the food we produce. So these two together represent 2 significant opportunities for both to reduce our burden on the land, but also our contribution towards climate change. And that might involve reimagining the typical Australian diet to reduce waste, promote more consumption of plants, less sugar, less ultra-processed foods, and less animal-sourced foods. So I think a big dietary shift will be a great way to contribute to both of those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roman. And I think, let me go to Paula, because I think one of the things about ultra-processed foods, you were talking a little bit before, and you gave us a snippet into the noodle program that the noodle revolution, the healthy food noodle revolution that Agora is leading. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I think this is one of those challenges, because these ultra-processed foods or foods that are not as healthy are often cheaper and more available. What are you guys doing in Timor? Can you give us a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go across to the kitchen, because I think they've caught up with us a little bit. So, and I can see some nice food there. Paula.
Sure, thanks. First, about noodles, I just want to clarify. Today I gave you the picture of this. I mean, the other one, the plastic one. Actually, I just clarified that we didn't use plastic, and the other one just locked down. So just try to experiment the packaging, but actually we used the paper bag. So and then the noodles revolution. I already explained to all of you that the reason why we come up with this idea, because we want to give healthy food and then use our own local products So in this, we try to do combination food. Like in Agora Food Studio, we also put in our menu, like every day, we do cook already with the, for example, like moringa, but we also do combination with other food like bitter, like papaya flower, and then also with like green vegetables and some meat. We like different combination like that. And then what we do here, we also like tasting. So that's a tasting food, like tasting our mouth. So we know that the food is like sweet, bitter, or salty. So we need to like tasting every day. This what we do now. And then to noodles revolution, we next week we're going to train other people from district like Baucau and Manatutu to train them to use their own local products there. For example, like if in Manatutu they have sweet potato, I love sweet potato, we use that product to do like noodles. And then we try with this project, we're trying to use this. We train them, and then we also bring them to Delhi, give them training, and then they come back to the district, implement them there, and then share to other community there. And then and then we also like do several activity like competition for how they do noodles maker. And then we hope to this project can spread to every district in this Timor-Leste, so we can minimize slowly about noodles.
That's amazing.
And the
Yeah.
second,
What I love about the connections too. So you're using this value addition around these noodles, taking the ingredients, adding value to them, but localizing that. And I think, Param, you're talking about that in India. Roman, you're talking about how we acknowledge the indigenous, the resilience of our own space, and think about what's going on in place. The place connects us so much to food. And going back to the kitchen, this is absolutely amazing conversation, and I wish we had longer. I feel like we're coming to the close. So I'm going to bring Sandra and Peggy back. So if you guys can unmute, I can see some amazing dishes ready. And this is also a story of place and a story of resilience and health, because this is a recipe that you, Peggy, when you were in Canada, you picked up on and connected to, but it kind of brings you back to that space when you cook it, I'm sure. So how's it looking, Peggy?
Yeah, we're pretty much done. This is just the quickest. This is just the quickest way of making lunch, to be honest. 20 minutes and we're done. So we've got the brown rice noodles on the bottom that have been blanched. We've got some bok choy, and then we already dressed it with some cilantro and Thai basil. And then we made this vegan nok cham. So it's like a vegan fish sauce of sorts with wakame inside. And then all we need to do now is really to put some broth in there with all of the deliciousness that you see.
It's looking pretty good, Paul.
And how does it smell, Sandro?
Oh my God, it smells incredible. I honestly feel like I'm in Hong Kong with Peggy. Mine doesn't quite look as nice plated up as hers, but it's it smells amazing.
Oh, look at that. No, it looks good. I think you've done pretty well on your plate. I think
well, I was
Sandra.
You put the pressure on, Paul.
So no, this is awesome. And I think, look, this connection to food, you can see the steam rising, the freshness in those ingredients. And this is why food is such a connector for us all. But it's also part of the solution. It's the solution to climate change. It's the solution to our economic and inequality issues. It's a solution to the connecting and livelihood issues. It's a solution to so many different things. And so as our panel, and as Sandra, you set up, the food system is such a key part of how we need to work together. And what we eat each day and the ingredients we choose is just so important. And as we go to this food system summit, we need people like the group, you guys on this panel, leaning in, engaging with communities and raising your voices from where you are about about the challenges you see, but also the opportunities, the solutions, you know, the local projects which are happening in whatever form. And so I'm super excited by this conversation. I'm hoping that people will take this conversation, maybe go home and make some tonic pho noodle soup, and please go online and have a look. We'll share some stuff on the Chef's Manifesto page and on a number of other socials. But also check out, you know, Moo Farm, Climate Proof Food, Agora Food Studios. I'd love to get some of those noodles. You've made me super interested, Mark and Paola. Really, really appreciate it. Check out, Sandra's got a great cookbook that connects planetary health and food. So I really we are at time. And so what I probably was going to hope to do was go in a bit more detail with everyone. But I think we're just going to have to do a bit of a show of hands with the panel over who do they think won the best presentation. So this is no pressure, but hold your dishes up, Sandro and Peggy, and let's just see. What do you guys think? Param, who do you vote for?
I'll go for Peggy.
You go for Peggy. Sorry, Sandro. Okay, Roman.
Well, I'll tell you what, beautiful or not, it's delicious. That's all I can say.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Peggy. Sorry, Sandra. It was a hard choice though. I wish I could have a bowl myself.
What about you, Mark?
Everyone's a winner. No, Peggy's broth is a little bit more balanced, the ratio, but Sandro, you can't be good at everything. So.
What do you think, Paola?
Thank you.
Paola?
For me, I think two of them is yummy, but now I like Peggy because to Peggy remind me to my municipality, because she saw the herbal and then medicine. We also use this for in my every week we also try to drink papaya
wow.
or water, and then this push from our family. So this has to be, that's why I see the plate also nice combination, and I think it will be yummy, but Sandra also good also there.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Happy World Food Day. And we're going to go now where the next sessions are going to be coming up very shortly. So stick around next 24 hours. There's going to be great content. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate you. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.